And good morning, everyone. Namaste. Welcome to Hindu Lounge. This is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact. Hindu Pact is the policy research and advocacy collective and initiative of World Council of America. Hindu Lounge comes live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern, and we talk about contemporary American Hindu issues on Hindu Lounge. And as always, with me is Utsada. Utsada is Utsav Chakrabarti, back from his well deserved vacation. And I am Ajay Shah. Utsada is the executive director of Hindu Pact, and I am Ajay Shah. I'm the president of World Hindu Council of America, or WHPA. Utsada, welcome from whatever sunny spot you are in.
Thank you, Ajay bhai. I am in Miami, Florida, and it's
Awesome.
I'm still here. So
You're still there. So I hope you're enjoying. I hope you're enjoying Miami, and you did your Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebration. Mahotsav is celebration. It's a festival. So you did the festival celebration in Miami, I guess, or did you?
I did it in Washington, but I was in flight when it was happening. So,
Well,
but it's 75 years, so I
yeah,
get
that's
to
right.
do it for 75 days, I guess.
That's right. That's right. Hey, so today we have a really interesting sort of topic. So we have two topics, and one of them is the 75 years of India's independence. Of course, we'll talk about it, but we will take a very different kind of a view on this topic, and we'll give you some unprecedented accomplishments that India has had in those 75 years. And we are also going to talk about the unprecedented hate. And the reason we are talking about we usually talk about the contemporary American Hindu issues, but we are talking about India because India is our dharma bhumi, and be a source of inspiration for all of us, for our dharma, for our philosophy, for our way of life, for our thinking. And the other thing is that when we talk about the unprecedented hate, why do people hate India? Well, because they cannot fathom the freedom that emanates out of Hindu ethos. And so that is the connection, the larger connection between the topics of unprecedented accomplishments for India and unprecedented hate. And then we'll talk about vandalism as at a Hindu mandir in Queens, one of the boroughs of New York City. But before that, Utsoda, welcome to you. And uh, you know, this is the most of the Hindu activists have demanded this for a very long time, that India should not just talk about independence, because the independence of India was, a very bloody event. Millions of people died, were rendered homeless, and for the first time after 75 years, the government of India actually went and recognized the horrors of partition by celebrating, uh, August 14th, the day before the Independence Day, as the Partition's Horror Remembrance Day. Usada, you have a unique take on history. Tell us about it.
Well, one thing that needs to be understood, and we always make sure people need to know, is that the the what was recognized as independence of India was essentially not just an independence for more than almost 2 centuries of British colonial rule, but it was also one of the most tragic events in the subcontinent's history, Indian subcontinent's history, where the entire country was partitioned into on the basis of religion on the demand of the Muslim League. And it was, what happened during and thereafter, it should be considered as one of the largest tragedies of the 20th century, if not the largest, in terms of its impact and its lasting uh, geopolitical implications. So, from that aspect, the people need to understand that while we celebrate 75 years of India's freedom from British colonial rule, it is essentially also 75 years of the dismemberment of a nation that has been a nation, a beacon of knowledge, religion, and philosophy for thousands of years, and that I think has much more lasting implications for all of humanity than anything else. And so it is a very it's a very layered event, and we have to, as time passes, more and more people, it's already beginning to be recognized. Like, back in 1960, people would recognize 1947 and independence of India in 1947 as just the end of the British colonial era, because that was fresh in their mind. That was the event that happened. Fast forward to 2022, it's 75 years, and people are already realizing that what happened in 1947 was not just an end of the British colonial era, but it was one of the largest civilizational events, at least in the 20th century. And as time passes, people will recognize this even more, and there will be efforts made to revive what was lost. And I think that has already begun in many ways.
Utsada, it is amazing that this is not, as many people like to say, as you correctly said, many people think that this is an independence that was achieved after 200 years of British rule. For most of India, that is actually not true, right? Most of the people in India, it was independence that was achieved after 1200 years, because they
Correct.
were living under in one part of the other or the other um, of India was under foreign occupations for 12 foreign occupation for 1200 years. And so this is much more monumental in terms of the kind of freedom, a sense of euphoria, sense of freedom that most Indians experience. And yet the work of independence is not complete. The large parts of India were weaned away from India, and they're not. It's almost. We always talk about Akhanda Bharat, and Akhanda Bharat is not Akhand Bharat right now. It is a Khandit Bharat. So India that is broken, and we sincerely hope that next 75 years, just as it has happened in Germany and some of the other countries, next 75 years may we hope, we pray, maybe in our lifetimes, maybe not in our lifetimes, but someday Mother India will become whole again.
Correct. And that has been what India has been for thousands of years. It's not a not just a nation state. It's not just a constitutional state as it is now. uh, it is a civilizational state, and this civilizational state is probably the only civilizational state that has been in complete continuum for most of recorded history. There has been no other such civilizational state that has had such a long history. I mean, there have been other civilizational states. Egypt used to be one. Egypt and Northern African, the Nile Delta civilizational state used to be one. The Greco-Roman civilizational state used to be one. Um, the Tigris Euphrates civilizational state used to be one,
Right.
and of course the Chinese civilizational state used to be one. What the Chinese probably have the closest claim to being somewhat closer to India as a civilizational state, but it is not, because in 1960s, during the complete takeover of China and destruction of Chinese identity by the Marxist globalists, China is not a civilizational state anymore, and it is there is a movement there to reclaim it, and it's changing, but it's as it stands now, it is a communist globalist state. But India is the only state that, despite direct colonial rule for more than almost a millennia in most parts, in some parts they're not there. I mean, in some parts it's not been that long, but it still manages to be a civilizational state.
And look, I mean, as much as China has been a continuous civilization. As a graduate student, I sat through several months of, not the whole course, but several months of the class on China and South and China and Japan. Actually, the course, entire graduate school course was about China and Japan, and they talked about how much, when it came to philosophy, when it came to various aspects, Chinese are to be very proud of their culture and all of them, and they rightfully, they have a claim to it. But when it came to philosophy, when it came to knowledge, a lot of it, they derived from the ancient Indian and ancient Hindu knowledge. So with that, so and a lot of things to be proud about, right? The population, of course, went from 340 million to 130, 1.4 billion. The GDP grew from 2.7 lakh crore to 197 lakh crore. Per capita income rose from 274 rupees a year to 1.26 lakhs, so 126,000 rupees. Poverty rate in 1947, Utsada, was 70%, and now it is 22%. It has to be zero, but it has made a great stride. Literacy was 12%. Actually, Mahatma Gandhi said that the literacy in India was actually more before the British arrived compared to when British left. Only 12% people could read and write their name when British left in 1947. Today, that is at the latest numbers I have are it's there's almost a universal enrollment, and the literacy rate is over 77%. The life expectancy was only 37 years in 1947, and today it is 70 years. That's the advance in medicine. The food grain, I remember growing up in India, where there were food shortages, and there were food that was being imported from US and other places, and today India is a net exporter of food. Electricity, imports, export, roads. India had 4 kilometers, 400,000 kilometers of road. Today, it is 6.4 million kilometers of road and extensive network. And per 100,000, there were 41 people who owned the car. Today, 2,275 people own the car. So that the reason I bring this up is because you would think that everyone in India would be celebrating, and most people are. But when you open up the paper in America, what do you see? So that this is what you see. In Washington Post, Rana Ayub, our favorite journalist from Mumbai, um, and currently in Chicago, writes op-ed over there, and she says, and I'm going to read a few sentences and get your take, right? She says that Prime Minister Modi and Amit Shah are urging people to display flags at the homes and businesses and post the pictures on social media. But of course, this could only lead to more polarization in Modi's India, where blind nationalism is displacing democracy at a rapid pace. Okay. Then she says WhatsApp group among relatives, colleagues, and friends are descending into virtual us versus them slugfests over the flag. In India, patriotism has become a toxic performance. And then this statement: there's little to celebrate this Independence Day. The past 8 years have made India a global cause of alarm, as the Modi government has subverted democracy in favor of its own brand of autocratic Hindu nationalism. So the nothing to celebrate. That's what says Rana Ayub. What say you?
I think Rana Ayub certainly doesn't have much to celebrate. She's not succeeding in seeing in India move in a direction where Pakistan is. She's not succeeding in enabling the destruction of India's industries, India's religion, India's civilizational identity. She's not succeeding in getting Kashmir out of India. She's not succeeding in bringing about street level violence across New Delhi and major urban centers. She's not succeeding in shutting down industries and reducing economic growth. So yeah, I think she has good reasons to be unhappy, and I think there are many other people who support her who are equally unhappy. I mean, many of them are in Islamabad, some of them are in Doha, some of them in Istanbul, and a few in Washington D.C. They have reason to be unhappy, but they can be unhappy. I mean, not everybody has to be happy.
And it's interesting because every country, and we celebrate 4th of July here as Independence Day. every place you go, people are selling flags, people are buying flags, displaying flags outside the house, and that is not considered toxic nationalism. But when Indians do it on the significant 75th anniversary of the independence after being enslaved for 1200 years, to that, that celebration to Rana Ayub is toxic. Uh, and then she goes around throwing some statistics here and there, which every article that I'm going to talk about read has the same statistics. So I'm not going to read them. But then she says the country's powerful film industry has set out to dehumanize Muslims and promote Islamophobia. And the country continues to fail many of its most vulnerable citizens. So she is referring to, without saying it, the movie Kashmir Files. I mean, if you look at the Bollywood movies today, most of the movies ridicule Hindus, Hindu practices, Hindu deities. But one movie that came out, which strung together historic facts into a movie, gained a lot of popularity, and for the first time showed people around the world this condition of Kashmiri Pandits, Kashmiri Hindus. And Rana Ayub has this visceral allergic reaction.
Well, I must. That's what I'm trying to say. That the people like Rana Ayub, who are patronized by organizations like the Washington Post, really do have a different vision of India. They completely empathize and enjoy the colonization of India. They want to bring back that colonization. Uh, they want to see India as a, a basket where things are taken out of, and people who continue to live in misery and poverty under a global caliphate. That is their vision of India. And so, from her perspective, Rana Ayub is not unhappy, and I can understand that. I'm pretty sure if Muhammad Ali Jinnah was alive today, he would have been equally unhappy. I'm pretty sure if Ayub Khan was alive today, he would have been equally unhappy. So, these things are, you have to understand. I give them that space to be unhappy, and I'm very respectful of their unhappiness, but I just want uh, the world to realize why they are unhappy, and that's all I'm trying to explain.
Yeah,
As long as I know why they are unhappy, I'm okay.
well, Muhammad Ali Jinnah has many reasons to be unhappy. Nobody really, cares for Muhammad Ali Jinnah even in Pakistan today, except to give him lip service. And uh, eh, eh, less we say about him, the better. She ends her article by saying, "Let's raise up the tricolor everywhere to cover up the injustice, the poverty, and desperation, the vindictive and pervasive cruelty of a government that has only succeeded in making us less independent and more narrow minded." Now, despite of all the numbers, and despite India being the fastest growing major economy in the world today, and all the other progress in every aspect, we didn't even talk about the space and science and all the other areas. Rana Ayub is unhappy. So Rana Ayub, please, if you're so unhappy with India, I'm sure your University of Chicago will give you a full time position. Washington Post will give you a full time position. Please, just stay here. We welcome you. In fact, we may throw her a welcome party. Utsada, you should quote. You should put this out as a tweet on Hindu Pack that Hindu Pack welcomes Rana Ayub to US and wishes that she stays here forever. She doesn't need India. India doesn't need her, right?
No. See, I think India needs her. I think what people like me have very grudgingly realized is that people like Rana Ayub inspire people in India to do better. Uh, so, as long as we are able to deal with the violence these people inspire and are able to counter it successfully, I believe that people like Rana Ayub inspire people in India to be better, and they have been doing better. I mean, since 2013, there were many more Rana Ayubs in 2013. And people decided to change that in 2014. And people have been successfully doing that. So I think Rana Ayub inspires far more Indians to remind them of their Hindu civilizational identity, to remind them of where they need to be, than we give credit to. So as long as we can contain the violence that people like Rana Ayub inspire, I think we can encourage them to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and you know you're absolutely right, because here's the second article that I came across. So and that is in Bloomberg. It's written by Mihir Sharma, and this article had so many comments that were pro India at the end of the article, that usually, when people write articles, and you don't get people. Hindus are generally not the kind who would just go out and protest everything, or write letters to the editor and all of that. But in this one, uh, evoked such a strong reaction from the Indian community, Hindu community, that it was, Bloomberg has to sit up and take notice of this. So this is the article, an article again by Mihir Sharma in Bloomberg, and these are all meant to commemorate, 75th anniversary of India's independence. And here is what Mihir Sharma writes. It's India's The title of the article is India's 75th anniversary is one to forget, and the subtitle is, for better or worse, much of the country no longer sees the departure of the British on August 15, 1947, as its real Independence Day. So that there is a term in India which is similar to Uncle Tom, and in US, and that is Brown Sahib. This is an article written by Brown Sahib, and I'm going to read a few sentences and then get your reaction. And pretty soon you'll realize that this is toolkit journalism. Same talking point in every single article, same statistics in every single article, and I'm not even going to dignify by going into those statistics and give them any airtime. So, but here is what Mihir Sharma says. The British left behind in 1947 a ruling class that upheld liberal norms and institutions, and in the Hindu nationalist worldview held by the New India's foot soldiers, was also effete, deracinated, and entirely anglicized. Being ruled by Western educated leaders such as Jawaharlal Nehru, independent India's first prime minister, was no better than being ruled by the British or Mughals, rendering independence meaningless. In this telling, we are still mentally enslaved, enthralled to imported ideas in our constitution, too humiliatingly weak to play a leadership role in global affairs. And Modi himself declared in 2014 that he would set India free from 1200 years of slavery. Okay. And then he goes on to say this: an India that bares its teeth, talking about the Ashok Stamba, which is the India's one of the greatest monuments with lions on looking in the four directions, bares its teeth, is one that should concern the world. Nehru's first republic saw itself as a leader of the post-colonial movement, forging a new and fairer international order, even if that dream of brotherhood was dashed in 1960s when Mao Zedong's China switched suddenly from partner to antagonist. It remained at the heart of India's engagement with the world in 2000. And then, just to finish this part up, Modi himself seems to have internationalist instinct, and many see advocacy advocating for developing countries as part of India's role. But the country he is creating will eventually demand the world acknowledge its strength. So the reason I picked this article is because it goes a little bit more into foreign policy. Now, he refers to in almost in passing, he refers to Nehru. He does not refer to the fact that Nehru lost 12,000 square kilometers of Indian land because of his, stupidity, shall we say? Um, India was offered a seat in the UN Security Council. He refused it, and he said that China should take it.
So Ajay bhai, I genuinely feel that hindsight is 2020. I do not I do not folly Nehru for his desire to change the world order. I think there was a genuine effort by Nehru to do so from a position of honesty and sincerity. What I do fault Nehru for is that he lacked real politicking abilities. And when I say real politicking abilities, I mean that you cannot run a global agenda or a geopolitical agenda based on idealism. And I think that was Nehru's biggest folly. In fact, that was Gandhi's biggest folly, as much as Gandhi is a respectable leader amongst Indians and Hindus. So I think looking back into at the last 75 years of our history and looking back at the first generation of leaders in the Indian subcontinent, you clearly see a contrast, and this contrast cannot be hidden. And more time passes, people see this contrast. You have this colonially educated leaders who really were well meaning in many cases, but lacked the ability to do real politic. Real politic means do politics on the basis of understanding their strengths and weaknesses. And on the other hand, you see this native, civilizationally rooted leaders like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, like uh, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, the first, the first president of India, who had a much better application of their ideals and brought better results in the application of those ideals. And this contrast, when even if I take away the political implications of criticizing Nehru or appreciating Nehru, it's a Congress party, BJP thing, I take all that away and just look at these leaders objectively without their political implications today, you still see this contrast. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel versus Nehru is a very good contrast to understand what a civilizationally rooted leader versus a colonially educated leader does in implementing their ideals and the efficiency they provide in it. So that's what I genuinely, that's my criticism of looking back at Nehru's politicking. And I think in terms of losing to 12,000 square kilometers of areas to China, I think it's the extension of the same thing. Nehru's faith in idealism and his lack of real politicking led to this destruction and led to this disaster. And I think we cannot change that anymore. I mean, we can possibly in the future, but at this time it is a status quo we have to deal with. But going forward, I think people have learned their lesson. I think, if anything, Modi has learned a lesson from these leaders.
Yeah, so then let me offer a slightly alternative explanation. I think there are certain leaders who, having a sense of accomplishment because India became independence and they had some role to play in it, they acquire a certain amount of arrogance, and they also acquire a certain amount of ambition to be regarded as the world leader. Nehru had both. So Nehru had certainly had arrogance, but he also had ambition to be counted as one of the tallest world leaders. And that manifestation of that arrogance was, look, coming out of Second World War, in coming out of 1,000 years of slavery, 1,200 years of foreign rule, India was certainly not a powerful country at the time. We just saw the statistics. There were countries and there were alliances that were a lot more powerful in 1947. So what did Nehru have to offer on the world stage in order to gain the world leader status? And what he offered on a platter is servitude to these powers to be. And if you appear to and you go and you claim that, look, I mean, we are just going to follow this path where we are, we are going to sacrifice our own national interest and be magnanimous in this world. So I am the one who is doing this. So please regard me as one of the top 3 or 5 leaders in the world of the era. And so I don't know if how that resonates with you, but that would be my view of it. Let me take a couple of other sentences, and maybe you can respond to these two and the previous one. Um, and then Mihir Sharma goes on to say that the strength that Modi is showing is built on unitary North Indian Hindu identity, where caste hierarchy may persist, but not caste identity politics. Okay? Hierarchy may persist, but not caste identity politics, when non-Hindus may not be persecuted, but must accept secondary status for their beliefs, where Hinduism itself must give up its extraordinary diversity of practice. And
So
so,
this is
so, so
this is
that this is interesting, right? Because the prime minister himself belongs to the other backward class. The previous president was Dalit. The current president is from the tribal, the Banavasi community, and yet uh, the prime minister, the strongest leader of his party and the country in many years to come, is counted as a casteist.
no. So you have to understand what Mihir Sharma is doing here is inserting Congress party's electoral political agenda into this conversation. So, you suddenly see that this is what happens when you are a journalist like Mihir Sharma, who is closely linked to one political party, which is the Congress party. And I think, journalists who are sympathetic to Sangh Parivar will do the same thing from the other side. What Mihir Sharma is doing here is that he does this analysis of India's foreign policy, India's postures, geopolitical postures, and so on and so forth, contrasting Nehru versus Modi. It's fine. He does a. I don't agree with him in the conclusions, but he makes some relevant observations. Here, what he does in the portion that you just mentioned is he inserts Congress party's electoral political talking points into the conversation. And what essentially he does is that he's trying to push that talking point and help his party, Congress party. Mir Sharma is a Congress party linked and a journalist. He doesn't want to shit on the hand that feeds him. Sorry, lack of a better word. So he's giving them their due in terms of promoting their agenda. So this conversation doesn't have any legs. Calling BJP casteist, calling BJP North Indian Hindu nationalist, these are tropes that opposition parties in India have used to try to hold on to power in some parts of India. It has failed in most parts of India significantly. It has succeeded in some parts. For example, in Bengal, Mamata Banerjee succeeds in convincing some elements within the Bengali educated elite, mostly left-leaning, that, okay, BJP is a North Indian Hindi-speaking party. Therefore, you should not vote. So it appeals to a small sections of elites, educated urban elites in some parts of the country. He's just clutching on to straws there. And they will do that for a while until they run out of those educated elites. And then, there's nothing more to clutch onto. But from my perspective, I think it's very simple. And most analysts who try to simplify things will understand it much faster than trying to convolute things and look for tails wagging dogs. The simple thing that most people have to understand is BJP and Modi primarily as a leader, sees India as a civilizational state. They see India as a Hindu civilizational state. They see diversity in Hindu Dharma, but they also identify the core principles of Hindu Dharma, which are quite consistent across the diversity. Most of these Western English educated elites like Mihir Sharma actually are not aware of that core principles and core fundamentals. Therefore, they don't see it. And Modi and the so-called Hindutva movement sees it, identifies with it, because it's a unifying thread. And the more it unifies people, the less the differences of castes and jati and varna and all these things that have been layered upon the society to divide people will go away. It will not take the diversity away of language, of food, of region, of practices, of philosophies. It has never done that historically. So I think it's very simple. That's what Modi wants. Will it happen? Maybe not 100%. Will it happen partially? It's already happening partially. Mihir Sharmas of the world and Rana Ayubs of the world will have a platform in Western vested societies uh, and Western media outlets which don't want to see this happen. And they will keep producing their content from those platforms. And there's nothing we can do about it. We can challenge them and try to explain the counter narrative through platforms like Hindu Launch. That's all we can do.
Absolutely. Hey, so that I want to, this is so the beauty of toolkit journalism is that you have the same talking points, and each of the journalists now targets a different market segment, if you will. So somebody would target, the market segment in US. Somebody targets the segment in Middle East. Somebody targets the Indian left, but give the same message consistently. And I want to demonstrate by telling you an article written by Somdeep Sen in Al Jazeera. He's a professor at some university, and this is what he writes. And I'm going to just read a few things. Right, he goes through a litany of negative things that has happened in his view on Modi's watch as a prime minister. And he starts by saying Modi government has run yet another successful marketing campaign that has struck a chord with many citizens, but there is very little to celebrate about India at 75. Same words, same message, same examples. And then he goes into detail with of COVID-19 and the COVID-19 response. He goes to the inflation, but he kind of grudgingly admits that the inflation is on the mend. He doesn't probably realize there's a global supply chain crisis and global crisis in terms with the Ukrainian and Russian war. He talks about rupee devaluation. He doesn't understand that it's not just rupee, it's euro, it's every other currency that is that is depreciated compared to dollar. But he just goes on and on and on. And he talks about lockdown and all the other things. Okay, that he sees that wrong. He blames the second wave of COVID-19 in India on Kumbh Mela, taking a swipe at Hindus and Modi again. And then he adds another element because he's writing for Al Jazeera. He talks about Islamophobic Citizenship Amendment Act, and he talks about how only the persecuted Hindus are allowed from these countries that have persecuted the minorities. And we have talked about it enough, so we don't need to revisit the Constitutional Amendment Act. And then it talks about the revocation of Article 370, and how it is, the Muslim majority special status, Muslim majority Kashmir special status in Indian Constitution was revoked. And then he says, it not only fulfilled the long-standing demand of India, but also, it has established a new pathway to Hinduize the state. All right, we're going to leave all that apart and all the same examples that he has given. But this is how he concludes. Admittedly, as this report card demonstrates, there is not much for India to celebrate on its 75th birthday. If the country wants to have something real to celebrate at its next milestone birthday in 2047, it needs to start acknowledging its shortcoming, failings, whatever, and work towards building a more free, equal, and democratic society and state. Toolkit journalism?
Yeah, I mean, and writing for Al Jazeera, that too, like writing for a media outlet that is essentially a mouthpiece of a religiously extremist, autocratic, theocratic state. That's quite rich in its sarcasm, I believe.
Well said, Utsada.
When you write for Al Jazeera and you complain about India's democracy and India's freedom, it tells you where your allegiances are and how delusional you are in your opinions.
That's so well put. Hey, so that this is and the two more which I'm going to quickly go over. This one in only a couple of minutes, because this is the one which, again, is a market segment. This is geared towards Christians. So you can see how nicely they've segmented the market, and they're going after each market with the exact same talking points, with some addition to appeal to that market. So the previous one appealed to Al Jazeera and to the Muslims who are outside of India. This one is written by Father Cedric Prakash. Now, Cedric Prakash is a Christian priest based out of Ahmedabad in Gujarat, and he makes this. His article is titled "Whose Freedom at 75?" Okay, whose freedom at 75? And then he goes on a long, it's written as if it's a political speech, and after every point he makes, he's asking whose freedom at 75. So I'm not going to belabor the whole thing, but he goes on to say the economy is in shambles, human rights are in shambles, the love jihad and other things are made up. uh, and then the conversion law, the law that bans conversion based on force, fraud, or intuitions is inductions. Force, fraud, and inductions are by giving paying money and getting converted. Those kinds of laws are illegal according to him, anti-constitutional. He is saying that the current government is out destroying the environment of India. And then he goes on to state the same statistics that all the other people from Rana Ayub to uh, everyone else have quoted. And so he goes on and on. And then he says about the rights of our Adivasis, we call them Vanvasis, are systematically being eroded. The areas which they have inhabited for centuries are used for industrialization and commercial purposes. Mining is rampant for profiteering of the mafia and so-called development works and other mega projects geared to making non-Adivasi richer. Now, this is a rhetoric. On the other side, so the first time there's a Vanvasi woman who is the president of India, and if the government did not do any of this, Cedric Prakash would be the first person saying that no development is brought in these areas. So you can't win. And then he talks about the human rights and all that. And then he sums up his article by saying, freedom is being throttled in India at every possible level. Millions of Indians are still not free. That is the sad and painful reality. It is not without reason that Tagore wrote long years ago, "Into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake." If we want to celebrate this landmark event, we first need to ask whose freedom at 75 and start doing something substantial and meaningful to change this serious and pathetic reality immediately. Father Prakash is not happy. So that he is very unhappy.
Yeah. So see, that's the question. Whose freedom?
Does he want to bring British back?
Yeah. No, that's the thing. Whose freedom? I mean, there was a lot of freedom. And the Church of India owns the second highest amount of land after the government railways, Indian Railways. So the government of India owns the most land. It's the government of India. And second highest amount of land owner in India is the Catholic Church of India. So I agree with him. Whose freedom? After 75 years, if it's still the Catholic Church of India that owns the highest amount of land in this country, in the country of India, then exactly whose freedom is he worried about? I think they should give away all that land, and then you see how freedom prospers in India, and all the misery and the poverty of that he's complaining about, it will help in removing that. So I agree with him in that aspect. I genuinely think that people like him and the churches that sponsor him need to be socialized, and need to be the money needs to be spread to the common masses irrespective of people's faith and religion, and see how quickly India prospers. So I empathize with him.
So this one now brings it all close to home, and this is the one written by a professor at Cal State University in Los Angeles, Akhila Anand, and she wrote an op-ed in Los Angeles Times, and her title was "As a Hindu, I can't stay silent about injustices in India committed in the name of our faith." And she starts out by saying, on Monday, India marks 75 years since its independence from British rule. Growing up in Orange County, I was taught that observing Hindu religious traditions made me a proud Indian. My family is Brahmin, the upper caste of Hinduism's ancient hierarchy. I learned South Indian classical dance, attended Hindu Sunday school, and spent summers at my grandparents' homes in Bengaluru in southern state. At the same time, my upbringing was relatively progressive. And she goes around saying how her grandfather was against BJP and all that. We'll skip that part. Um, and she says India's ruling ultra conservative right wing party supported by Hindus in India and abroad. And then she says these two sides of my identity bred a contradiction. At community gathering in California, I avoided politics like everyone else and smiled politely. All right. So that I want to pause here because we hear that from other people as well. This kind of self-loathing, because these several of these people belong to affluent classes in America, and they have this feeling of guilt. So
here is what I have to say.
Yeah.
Here is what I have to say. I think the fact that her grandfather was an anti-BJP guy made him casteist and made him give those convoluted colonial elitist teachings that this girl grew up with. Had his grandfather being a Hindutva person, she would have been much more egalitarian, much more socialist, and much more progressive than she is currently.
Well, on the other hand, she says that her parents don't agree with her.
Well, I don't know about her parents, but I think the fact that she mentions that her grandfather was casteist and also anti-BJP, I think that's what messed with her head. I think,
and look, I mean, she goes on to say Modi has waged war against poor people, farmers, indigenous, caste oppressed groups, and Muslims, and because of that, Hindu nationalists now feel free to brutalize those communities. Same
that's
thing.
Literally
right?
The talking point from
from the previous one, but it's coming now from the mouths of an American Hindu. Okay.
So I think this has been going on for a while. There have been a bunch of these people. Interestingly, most of them claim that their family members are Hindu and upper caste elites, but anti-BJP. So anti-Hindutva. So this is a trend. I think these are plants who probably get a few $100s to do this, and they will keep changing. I think there'll be a pool of about 50 or so of such people out there, mostly in the academia, who will be producing this content and moving them around over the years. I think that number will stabilize after some point, and they all will get some grants and keep moving up in that academia.
Yeah, and then she goes around and says that, look, I mean, they banned hijabs in government schools. I was like, this is government school. They have dress code. But she takes up the cause of hijab, even though the Muslim women are fighting around the world.
I think that's the best thing she could have done from our point of view. I think the moment these people take up causes like hijab and triple talaq, they give away their source of income and they give away their hypocrisy. So every time I really encourage these people to do this, they talk all these inane generalist opinions, which nobody can verify. So they will say, oh, Sikhs and Dalits and this and that, and the Bengalis and Gujaratis and Marathis are all oppressed, and the oppressor is somehow a nebulous Hindutva. Most Americans would believe that because they have no clue what shit they are talking about. But the moment they say, I support hijab, I support the right for a Muslim man to marry 3 women simultaneously, four women simultaneously. The moment they say that brings them down to a place where their hypocrisy is openly visible and where their agenda comes out. So I really encourage that. I want them to do that. They should continue doing that.
Yeah, so we're running out of time. So in interest of time, I'm going to club these last 3 points together and get your view and then move on to the new topic. We have only about 10 minutes left. So she said, then she writes that Modi showed me what was right below these polite smiles at the community events I attended. At best, elders, even my parents debated me, saying that, and she goes on to say that, how, reservation system was bad or whatever else. And then she said, when I was in India in December, before the COVID pandemic, I got into several tearful debates with cousins, repeating horrible stereotypes about Muslims. But conservatism in India is also culturally and financially supported by the communities here in the US. In November 2019, President Trump welcomed Modi to Houston Stadium with 50,000 paying. I don't think this was a paid event, but she, who fact checks her anyway? Paying Indian Americans. We in diaspora have a role to play against Hindu fundamentalism. The California State University, where I work, now includes caste as a protected category, which means that students, staff, or faculty can report caste based discrimination they face on campuses to university administrators for internal investigation. So she's on the casteist bandwagon. Then
Yeah,
she's on the South Asian
she wants
bandwagon,
to
the most
ensure that
Hindu
caste
phobic
identity
word.
continues.
And she says, growing movement of progressive South Asian Americans, and that includes Indians, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, and Nepalis in the US. And this is where she concludes. Okay.
So you should notice this when she includes Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and essentially Muslim identified groups. She will not speak about some of their progressives' demand to get rid of the hijab. Some of their progressives demand to get rid of the ability of the Muslim man to marry 4 times. They will not speak about that. You should notice this. So it's they will bring in a larger umbrella of multi-religious groups, but when it comes to targeting a religion, it only is about targeting Hindus. So it is very clear whose agenda these people are running. And I think the sad part here is that they are working very hard to destroy the future of Hindu Dharma in America. And the ignorance and the lack of knowledge that American society offers them allows them to do that, which is why organizations like Hindu Pact and people like us are important, because all we need to do is to tell the truth and people will get it. But it's a very challenging task to tell the truth because we don't have the resources and we don't have the platforms to share information. And I mean, what we are doing here is a small piece of the puzzle. But you can see they have a platform of Washington Post and Bloomberg and Al Jazeera, and we have a platform of Hindu Lodge. So that's where the contrast lies, and that's where we need empowerment, because all we have to do is tell the truth.
I have faith. I have faith in India, and I have faith in people of India, and I have faith in Hindus. And I'm going to show you this as a last part of our show, and we can keep the Queen's Mandir attack for next time because we are running out of time, if you don't mind. But I want to show you this Stimson Institute survey, and I want to get your view on the Stimson Institute survey, because this is a survey that actually exposes complete lies that have been peddled. That have been peddled. So take a look at this survey, Utsada, and tell me what you think about it. And then we have time and we want to do it, then we can talk about Queen's Mandir also. But I thought that this is such an effective counter. Utsada, on the right-hand side of the screen, you see the support for Prime Minister Modi by religion and caste. So first, tell us a little bit about the Stimson Institute, and then tell us why this survey matters, because they tried to separate out Hindus into upper caste and lower caste, or so-called upper caste, so-called lower caste Hindu. There is no such thing, but these are varnas, jatis. But this is how they have classified them. So I'm reading their words, not mine. And I don't even know who constitutes what, but let's just say that they're using constitutional definitions, and they found exactly the same support. They even found, much to the, I'm sure, disappointment of Father Cedric Prakash and all the Khalistani elements outside of India, that a vast majority of Christians, Sikhs, and others support Modi. And I'm sure this is going to churn Rana Ayub's stomach and Al Jazeera's stomach, that a third of Muslims are supporting Modi. A third. That is not an insignificant minority. Utsada, first tell us about Stimson Institute and some of the people behind this, and then tell us about the survey results.
So Stimson Institute is a typical Washington, D.C. think tank. It is quite well funded, well supported, one of the primary think tanks in the world. Plays a key role in its claim to fame historically has been their focus on nuclear non-proliferation. So Stimson Center has a lot of intellectual work that it has done globally on nuclear non-proliferation, on spread of nuclear technology, It's a geopolitically focused group. It has a slightly left of center positioning, but of course, it's an establishment supporter in America. So it will toe the line of what the American establishment toes. When it comes to specifically to this particular report, uh, it tells you a couple of things. It tells you that amongst Muslims, Modi has as much support as President Biden has amongst American people. So you make your own conclusions out of it. And I let people decide what they can decipher out of it. Amongst the so-called different jatis of India, Modi has almost the same amount of support, irrespective of where their position is in the quote unquote caste ladder, which is a very bothering thing. This is something that Akila from Cal State should be reading and understanding, and it will tell her, if she stands in front of the mirror and reads it, it will tell her that she's a liar. Uh, so these are some of the things that this Stimson survey tell us. Stimson survey also tells us that India is far more unified today than it was 20 years ago, than it was 50 years ago or 75 years ago. India is People in India have a far more civilizational understanding of who they are now than they have ever been in the past. And this is one of the reasons why Prime Minister Modi of India remains a very popular figure, despite, as many of our critics have said in their articles, economic hardships, devaluation of the Indian rupees. All those are real issues. Nobody's saying that India, is a honky-dory, la la land. There are real concerns in India. There are real issues to deal with: environmental issues, poverty issues, educational issues. All those are real issues. But it's a relative measurement, and people compare with the past, and people compare the intent of the leadership, which is why Modi is so popular. This is not very difficult to understand. And these people have to understand that they can keep going around in circles to peddle their hate and lies. And I'm pretty sure Al Jazeera and Washington Post and LA Times will give them the platform to peddle their propaganda. But that is not going to change reality on the ground. The fact remains that Modi is as popular amongst Muslims of India as President Biden is amongst the people of America. And that fact cannot change.
That
So
cannot change.
go from there.
Absolutely. Also, that this one last thing, and it's they have couched this very nicely. So the discriminatory attitude towards Muslim by respondents supporting Modi. The question here is about Muslim population growth is too rapid, and the two questions, right? Muslim population growth is too rapid, or opposition to a Muslim neighbor. Now, anyone who knows the thousands of a thousand year of past 1,000 year, 1,200 years of Indian history knows that even in traditional, for thousands of years, people lived in neighborhoods that are of people who, almost like cohorts, right? So they can do the religious practices together. There'll be a temple or a mosque in the center of the community, and so it's not the segregation kind of based on race, or segregation based on certain sexual preference or any of that. It is people who follow certain practices together. So if you're going to a temple becomes center of your community life, and you live around the temple. If you're a Muslim, you have a mosque at the center of your life, and you live around the mosque. That is not like separate housing kind of thing. And yet that is the loaded question that is asked. But if you look at the answer, that is more telling. 89% of Modi supporters are saying that, 41% of Modi supporters are saying that they would like to stay in a neighborhood that is predominantly Hindu, or predominantly Sikh, or predominantly Jain, or predominantly Muslim, well, not Muslim, but or Buddhist rather. On the other hand, 29% of people who do not support say the same thing. So the differential is 10%. So there's not a huge difference between Modi supporters or not. Now, it is a demographic fact that the population of Muslim, the rate of growth of the Muslim population is high. Now, whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, nobody's commenting on that, right? Just a simple demographic statistic question. 89% of Modi supporters have said yes. At the same time, 80% of people who are opposed to Modi have said this. So again, the difference is insignificant. So why is Modi considered, or BJP or Hindu based party considered to be a Muslim hating? Why these long op-eds in Al Jazeera, and why is Akila Anand all worked up?
You cannot reason with them. I think we should use them as a measure of uh, how the other side is thinking, how anti-Hindu and anti-India elements work and think. It's a window to their mindset, and use that as a measure to make ourselves better. I think it is how I look at it. As long as they don't inspire violence, and many of them do inspire violence. Uh, Once they do that, or when they commit corruption, like Rana Ayub has done, they steal money. Let law enforcement take the right steps in the process of the law of the land. But otherwise, when it comes to opinion, when it comes to propaganda, when it comes to spreading lies, take your lessons, understand what they're saying, and understand the fact that it's not going to change people of India's opinion uh, about what's happening, because people have a civilizational wisdom. People are beginning to understand, read, and write more. They are identifying a pattern of behavior that is happening across the globe, and they are responding to it. So even in American society, the things have changed. Even in Europe, things have changed. I mean, look at France. France is a beacon of every Western liberal person's agenda portrayal. Yet France has banned the hijab. France has banned Islamization of its society. Literally banned it, like
Yeah.
making laws to ban it. So these people who sit in these university libraries with a laptop sitting in front of them and an occasional paycheck that appears in their bank account for writing these agenda driven articles, they will eventually mean nothing. And that's what
And
it,
you're so right, Utsoda, because look at this. In a 7,000 people survey, more than 71% of people supported Narendra Modi. Okay.
and they could have just asked us.
We
Stimson
could
should
have
have.
saved the money, right?
Yeah,
And
Stimson could have saved the money of, or they could have given us the money of the 7,000 people survey. What Stimson
look, I
came up.
mean, this is the state of India today. I don't want to go into any more. We are practically out of time. I just
Right.
want to make unless you have a final comment, I just want to make appeal for donation and then move on. Do you have anything else to add, Utsoda? We
No,
can
I
do
have
the
nothing more to add, but I just want to say one thing. I'll make your appeal, Ajay bhai, for donation. You know, you have Rana Ayub on Washington Post. You have Akila on from Cal State. Their goal is not India. Their goal is not you and me. Their goal is the young children of the children and grandchildren who are Hindus in this country. They want to brainwash them. They want to use them against you. So if you want to stop that, donate to Hindu Pact. That's the only thing you can do at this point of time. Uh, we are the tip of the spear. If you want to see our work, just follow us.
and Utsoda, one more appeal, if you don't mind. Oh,
मनसा सततं स्मरणीयं मनसा सततं स्मरणीयं वचसा सततं वदनीयं मनसा सततं स्मरणीयं वचसा सततं वदनीयं लोकहितं.
And Utsoda, second appeal this time. As we said in past, last week, especially on the Hindu Mandir Executives Conference, Hindu Mandir Executives Conference is coming up on September 16th, 17th, and 18th. It is in Cincinnati, and it is a significant event for the Hindu community in America. Over 100 mandirs are expected to come together. And this time, actually, the focus is going to be on Hindu advocacy and how mandirs can become center of not just Hindu community, but of American life, and how mandirs can become center where issues of significance to all the people who are living in that area. How do we transition to that state? In India, mandirs are always center of the community. Now we want to make sure that that happens in America as well. So several people from Hindu Pact are going to be there. Utsoda is going to be there. Dhanesh is going to be there, our intern, and Renuji is going to be there, who leads our chapters and chapter development. And Ravi Khannaji is going to be there. Amulya Tyagiji is going to be there, and a whole bunch of other people from Hindu Pact are going to be there. In the and Vallabha Tiwariji, who heads up our Mandir relation for Hindu Pact, is going to be playing a key role in this. I'm also glad to announce and proud to announce that Anjali Rimiji, who was one of the most popular guests on our program, has also accepted the invite, and she's going to be there. So this is going to be a groundbreaking Hindu Mandir Executives Conference event. Please register by going to hmec.info, and please donate to VHP America. When you click on donate button, you'll see a cause HMEC listed over there. Please register, please go to the event, and at the very least, please make a contribution to Hindu Mandir Executives Conference. And I also want to say that there's a Support a Child fundraising events are going on. The team aims to support 4,500 kids in India. Supportachild.org, another initiative of VHPA. Utsada, unless you have anything to add, we are about 4 minutes over today, but I hope that's okay with you. I want to thank you for joining. Anything else you want to add before we close?
Nothing else to add.
In that case, thank you everyone for joining. This is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact, Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective, an initiative of World Hindu Council of America. We come live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern and talk about contemporary American Hindu issues with our co-host Utsada Chakrabarti, and I am Ajay Shah. And we will see you next week at 11 o'clock Eastern. Thank you everyone for joining.